The call went out across the stars. The galaxy needed soldiers. Worlds answered with their finest, disciplined, proud, and brave. Then came humanity's reply. We didn't send soldiers. We sent those forged in the fires of death worlds, the ones who fought hell itself and won. And when they arrived, every alien commander finally understood. Humans don't send warriors. They send monsters. The desperate summons, the Council of Last Hope Ambassador Theron of the Valkyrian Empire stood at the center of the Grand Chamber, his silver skin reflecting the dim light of 1,000 floating orbs. Around him, representatives from 43 species watched in silence. The holographic display above showed the same nightmare they had watched for 3 years. Worlds going dark, one after another. Red markers indicated dead planets consumed by the scourge. There were too many red markers now. Theron's voice carried the weight of extinction. We have lost 17 worlds in the past month alone. Our fleets are scattered. Our armies are exhausted. Every strategy we have tried has failed. We are not simply losing this war. We are being erased. A Zenthari general, his blue scales dulled by stress, slammed his fist on the table. What are you proposing, Ambassador? We have thrown everything at the scourge. Our finest warriors, our most advanced weapons, our greatest tactical minds. Nothing stops them. Theron activated a new display. A small blue planet appeared, rotating slowly. This is Earth, a world we discovered 18 months ago during a routine survey. The inhabitants call themselves humans. They have barely achieved interstellar capability. Their technology is primitive by our standards. Laughter rippled through the chamber. A Peltorian delegate, her 6 arms gesturing dismissively, spoke up. You want us to ask primitives for help? Have you lost your mind, Theron? I have studied their history, Theron continued, his voice steady. These humans have been at war with themselves for their entire recorded existence. They have developed 12,000 different ways to kill each other. Their planet has seen conflicts that consumed entire continents. They possess a capacity for violence that we cannot comprehend. The laughter died. An elder from the Crystalline Collective leaned forward, their body chiming softly. You are suggesting we invite barbarians into a civilized war? I am suggesting, Theron said carefully, that we are beyond the luxury of civilization. The Scourge does not honor our codes of combat. They do not negotiate. They consume. Perhaps we need allies who understand that kind of enemy. Allies who fight without the burden of 10,000 years of honor and tradition. The debate raged for hours. Some called it desperation. Others called it madness. But as the hologram continued to show worlds falling into darkness, the vote was called. By the narrowest margin in Council history, the decision was made. They would contact Earth. Earth's Dark Decision President Elena Vasquez stood in the Situation Room beneath Washington, D.C., staring at the translation of the alien message. The world's most powerful leaders watched her through secured video feeds. The message had been broadcast on every frequency, impossible to ignore or deny. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and the universe was dying. They're asking us to send soldiers, said General Marcus Webb, his weathered face grave. 25,000 troops to fight in an interstellar war we don't understand against an enemy we've never seen. Our military isn't ready, the Secretary of Defense argued. We have no experience with alien combat, no knowledge of the terrain, the enemy tactics, They're not asking for our military, Webb interrupted. He placed a black folder on the table. The cover read, Project Tartarus, Eyes Only. 6 years ago, after the resource wars, we faced a problem. We had captured war criminals, mass murderers and soldiers who had crossed lines that shouldn't exist, people too dangerous to imprison with normal populations, too valuable to execute immediately. We built Facility Tartarus in the Antarctic, underground cryogenic suspension, 3,000 of the most violent, unstable, and effective killers humanity has ever produced. The room fell silent. President Vasquez opened the folder. Face after face stared back at her from the pages. Names, crimes, psychological profiles. Vincent Cade, Reaper, responsible for the deaths of 800 enemy combatants during the African fusion conflict, court-martialed for refusing to take prisoners. Nadia Volkov, Ghost, former Spetsnaz operative who assassinated 42 targets in the Eurasian collapse, known for her complete lack of empathy. Diego Santos, Marcus Chen, Yuki Tanaka. The list went on. Murderers, yes, but also survivors. People who had seen the worst of humanity and become something beyond human in response. You want to send our criminals to represent humanity? asked the Chinese premier. Webb's answer was blunt. I want to send people who can win. These individuals were locked away because they scared us. They didn't fight with honor or restraint. They fought to survive, and they were terrifyingly good at it. If this galaxy needs soldiers to fight an enemy that doesn't play by rules, then we send people who never learned the rules in the first place. The debate lasted 3 days. Religious leaders called it immoral. Military advisors called it necessary. Ethicists called it a crime against humanity. But the images from space kept coming. Alien worlds burning, entire civilizations vanishing. Finally, President Vasquez made the decision that would define her legacy. Wake them up. All of them. The monsters awakened. Major Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck above Facility Tartarus as technicians began the revival process. Below her, 3,000 cryogenic pods hummed to life. She had volunteered to lead the human contingent, to serve as liaison between these criminals and the alien coalition. She wondered if she had made a mistake. The first pod opened. Vincent Cade emerged slowly, his body covered in scars from a dozen conflicts. His eyes opened, cold, calculating, empty of anything resembling mercy. He looked around the facility, then up at Chen watching from above. He smiled. It was not a friendly smile. One by one they woke. The room filled with the most dangerous people Earth had ever produced. They stretched. They laughed. They looked at each other with recognition, predators acknowledging fellow predators. These were not soldiers who had broken under pressure. These were people who had never had pressure in the first place. People who had found purpose in violence and excelled at it beyond all moral boundaries. Chen activated the intercom. You were all convicted of crimes against humanity. You were sentenced to permanent suspension. But Earth needs you now. The galaxy needs you. Fight for us and you may earn your freedom. Refuse and you go back into the ice. Reaper stepped forward, speaking for the group. His voice was rough, unused for years. Freedom? Major, we never wanted freedom. We wanted war. You locked us away because we were too good at it. Now you're giving us permission? He laughed and others joined him. Where do we start? Within 48 hours, 3,000 prisoners were loaded onto transport ships. They were given basic weapons training with alien technology, minimal briefings on coalition protocols, and clear instructions. Kill the scourge. Nothing else mattered. As the transports prepared to launch, Chen stood with General Webb, watching through the hangar windows. Do you think this will work? She asked. Webb's expression was unreadable. I think we just sent the galaxy's nightmare to fight another nightmare. God help us all if they win. The ships launched, carrying humanity's darkest secret into the stars. The prisoners sat in silence during the journey, each lost in their own thoughts. They had been monsters once, locked away where they couldn't hurt anyone. Now they were being given weapons, pointed at an enemy, and told to do what they did best. Some felt vindication. Others felt nothing at all. But all of them felt the same anticipation, the thrill of purpose returning after years of frozen darkness. Reaper looked out the viewport at the alien stars rushing past. They wanted soldiers, he said to Ghost sitting beside him. They're getting something else entirely. Ghost's smile was sharp as a knife. They're getting us. The transport ships jumped to hyperspace carrying 3,000 human monsters toward a war the galaxy was losing. Whether they would save civilization or become its next nightmare remained to be seen. Baptism in blood arrival at Hell's doorstep. The transport ships dropped out of hyperspace above planet Xerxen 9, and every human pressed against the viewports to see their new battlefield. The planet looked like a wound in space. Half its surface was covered in black biomass, spreading like cancer across continents. Massive spires jutted from the infected zones, pulsing with sickly bioluminescence. The scourge had been feeding here for 6 months and the planet was dying. Commander Theron waited in the landing bay of Kepler Station as the human ships docked. He had prepared himself for this moment, but nothing could have truly prepared him. The humans emerged in clusters, not neat military formations. They wore mismatched gear, some bearing tattoos that covered entire arms, others carrying scars that told stories of violence. They moved like wolves, constantly aware of their surroundings, assessing threats, evaluating escape routes. Major Sarah Chen was the first to approach, saluting formally. Commander Theron, the human contingent is ready for deployment. Behind her, 3,000 criminals stood waiting. Some were examining their weapons with professional interest. Others stared at the coalition soldiers with unsettling intensity. One man was laughing at nothing, his eyes distant. Theron gestured toward the briefing hall. "We need to discuss tactics and integration with our forces." As they walked, coalition soldiers moved aside, instinctively creating distance from the humans. The Xanthari warriors, proud and decorated, looked uncomfortable. The Peltorians whispered among themselves. Everyone felt it. Something dangerous had arrived. In the briefing room, holographic displays showed Xerxon 9's situation. General Carvax, a massive drun with stone-like skin, outlined the problem. "We have been fighting on this world for 6 months. Every assault fails. The Scourge adapts to our tactics within days. They outnumber us 50 to 1 in the infected zones. We lose 300 soldiers each week just holding our current positions." Vincent Cade, known as Reaper, studied the displays with sharp interest. He had not spoken since arrival, but now he raised his hand. "What happens when you kill them?" "The Scourge warriors." Carvax seemed surprised by the question. "They dissolve. Their biomass returns to the hive structure. They waste nothing. And prisoners? The Scourge takes no prisoners. They consume everything organic. There is no negotiation, no surrender. Only death." Reaper smiled slowly. "Perfect. No rules then." Theron felt cold despite his environment suit. "What do you mean, no rules? Your coalition fights with honor codes, right? Rules of engagement, protocols for surrender, respect for the dead." Reaper looked around the room at the other humans. "We don't have any of that. If the enemy doesn't take prisoners, doesn't negotiate, just kills everything, then we respond the same way. Pure survival. No limits." Nadia Volkov, the woman called Ghost, spoke up from the shadows. "Where are their weak points? Breeding chambers, command nodes, food supplies?" "We do not target civilian infrastructure," Carvax said firmly. "It violates the Galactic Convention on Warfare." Ghost's laugh was cold. "Commander, they're eating planets. You think they care about your conventions?" She leaned forward, her scarred hands spread on the table. "You want to win this war or feel good about losing it?" The room erupted in argument. Coalition officers were offended, outraged at the suggestion of abandoning their principles. The humans remained calm, almost amused. They had seen this reaction before from people who still believed war had rules. Major Chen intervened. "Commander Theron, may I speak privately?" The uncomfortable truth in. A side office, Chen faced Theron and the senior coalition officers. "You need to understand what you asked for. These people aren't soldiers in your sense. They're survivors of conflicts where the only rule was staying alive. They don't fight for honor or glory. They fight to win." "Then they are savages," a Peltorian officer said with disgust. "Yes," Chen agreed quietly. "That's exactly what they are, and that's why Earth sent them. You're losing this war because you're civilized. The Scourge isn't. My people will match that. They'll go into the dark places your soldiers can't, do the things your warriors won't, and they'll win because they have nothing left to lose." Theron considered this carefully. "What are you asking?" "Give them one sector. Let them fight their way. No oversight, no rules of engagement. If they fail, you can send them back to Earth. If they succeed, you deploy them where you need victories most." The decision was made reluctantly. The humans would be given Sector 7, the most contested area, where coalition forces had suffered 70% casualties over 3 months. If the humans could hold it, or better yet, push forward, they would prove their value. If they died, well, they were criminals anyway. Into the meat grinder dawn broke over Sector 7 with the color of blood. The humans had spent the night preparing, but not in ways the coalition expected. They dug no trenches. They built no fortifications. Instead, they set traps, crude, brutal devices that would maim and kill anything that triggered them. They painted symbols on rocks and trees, markings that meant nothing to the coalition but everything to the humans. Psychological markers, territory claims. Reaper gathered his people as the sun rose. 3,000 faces looked back at him, and he saw himself reflected in their eyes. Empty, hungry, alive for the first time in years. "They put us in the worst sector because they expect us to die," he said simply. "They think we're disposable. Maybe we are, but I'm not dying for their cause. I'm dying on my terms, taking as many of those things with me as I can." He held up his weapon. "This isn't about redemption. This isn't about earning freedom. This is about proving that humanity's worst is better than this galaxy's best. Show them what monsters really look like." The Scourge attacked at noon. They came in a wave of chittering biomass, thousands of warrior forms erupting from tunnels beneath the surface. Each creature was a nightmare of evolution. Bladed limbs, armored carapaces, mouths designed for tearing and consuming. They had overwhelmed coalition forces through sheer numbers and relentless aggression. The humans responded with something the Scourge had never encountered: joy. As the creatures charged, the humans opened fire, but they were laughing, screaming war cries in dozens of languages. Diego Santos, a veteran of the South American cleansing, threw himself into the swarm with nothing but a combat knife, stabbing and slashing with manic energy. Yuki Tanaka, former Yakuza enforcer, used a flamethrower at point-blank range, turning herself and 3 Scourge warriors into a fireball. The Coalition observers watching from orbital platforms were horrified. This wasn't combat. This was chaos. The humans fought without formation, without coordination in any traditional sense. Yet somehow it worked. They moved like they shared a single predatory instinct, covering each other, flowing around obstacles, adapting instantly to threats. Ghost led a team of 12 into the Scourge tunnels against all tactical advice. Going underground was suicide. The tunnels belonged to the enemy. But Ghost had grown up in the Moscow undergrounds during the collapse, fighting gang wars in darkness where hesitation meant death. She moved through the alien passages like she owned them, memorizing turns, marking routes with chemical trackers. When her team emerged hours later, they were covered in black ichor, carrying Scourge biosamples and precise maps of the tunnel network. 3 breeding chambers within 2 kilometers, she reported to Reaper, each one producing about 500 warriors per day. Also found something interesting. They coordinate through chemical signals in the walls. Disrupt that, you disrupt their whole operation. Reaper understood immediately. Can we poison it? Already did, Ghost said, her smile sharp. Dropped some lovely toxins from Earth. Modified ricin compounds. Should start affecting their communication within hours. By nightfall, Sector 7 was still in human hands. The ground was covered with Scourge corpses and human casualties, but the line had held. More importantly, the humans had pushed forward 500 meters, claiming territory the Coalition had lost months ago. The surviving humans gathered around fires, cleaning weapons, treating wounds, laughing about kills like they were sharing hunting stories. Major Chen walked through the camp, checking on her people. She found Reaper sitting alone, staring at a piece of Scourge carapace he had kept. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I haven't felt this alive since the African fusion conflict," he said honestly. "This is what I'm good at, Major. This is what I was made for. Put me in an office, I'm a problem. Put me in a war zone, I'm a solution." He looked up at her. "I know what I am. I stopped pretending to be anything else a long time ago." Chen sat down beside him. "The Coalition is watching. They're disturbed by your methods. Good, they should be." Reaper tossed the carapace away. "They asked for soldiers to fight monsters. We're showing them that sometimes you need bigger monsters. They don't have to like it. They just have to let us work." 3 weeks of horror. The battle for Sector 7 lasted 21 days. Each day brought new Scourge assaults, and each day the humans pushed back harder. They learned the enemy's patterns and adapted faster than any Coalition force had managed. When the Scourge tried flanking maneuvers, the humans predicted them. When the enemy tried overwhelming numbers, the humans used their environment, collapsing tunnels, triggering avalanches, setting massive fires that consumed thousands of warrior forms. But the methods became increasingly brutal. Marcus Chen, a former Chinese Special Forces operator, started collecting Scourge pheromone glands and using them to confuse enemy formations, causing the creatures to attack each other. A woman named Isabella Cortez developed a technique of capturing wounded Scourge and releasing them back into tunnels carrying human-made pathogens. The creatures would return to their hives and spread infection before dying. Coalition Command watched the reports with growing unease. The humans were winning, yes, but at what cost? They showed no mercy, took no prisoners that could survive anyway, and treated the enemy with a cruelty that seemed excessive even against the Scourge. Video footage showed humans laughing while burning nests, cheering while collapsing tunnels full of larvae, celebrating kills with savage enthusiasm. Ambassador Theron called another emergency meeting. "They are effective," he admitted. "Sector 7 is secure for the first time in months. But their methods, this is not how civilized beings wage war." "The Scourge isn't civilized," General Carvax countered. Perhaps the humans understand something we refuse to accept. This enemy respects only violence. The humans give them violence beyond their comprehension. At what cost to our souls? Asked a crystalline collective elder. If we win this war by becoming monsters ourselves, have we truly won? The debate was interrupted by an urgent alert. Long-range scanners had detected a massive scourge formation moving toward the human sector. Estimates put the attacking force at over 50,000 warriors, 10 times the size of any previous assault. It was meant to overwhelm the human position completely, to teach these newcomers their place in the galactic order. Major Chen received the warning and immediately called her command team. Reaper, Ghost, and the other squad leaders gathered in the makeshift headquarters. She showed them the scanner data. They're coming. Everything they have. This is the test. Reaper studied the numbers calmly. How long do we have? 6 hours. Good. That's enough time. He looked at his fellow humans, and something passed between them, an understanding that needed no words. They had been given purpose again. They had been set free to do what they did best. And now they would prove that humanity's darkest children were exactly what this galaxy needed. Ghost spoke quietly. No retreat? No retreat, Reaper confirmed. We hold this ground or we die on it. Either way, we make them remember us. The humans prepared for the final assault. They didn't pray or write final letters. They checked weapons, set final traps, and waited with the patience of apex predators. When the scourge came in their countless thousands, they would find 3,000 humans who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you gave monsters permission to be monstrous. Price of Salvation, the Storm of Chiton, and Fury the Scourge came at sunset like a living tsunami. 50,000 warrior forms erupted from a dozen tunnel networks simultaneously, their chittering war screams drowning out every other sound. From orbit, Coalition observers watched in horror as the black tide swept toward the human positions. Tactical computers calculated total annihilation within 17 minutes. The humans did not run. Reaper stood at the center of the defensive line, watching the enemy approach. Around him, 3,000 criminals turned soldiers waited with weapons ready and expressions calm. Some were smiling. Others showed no emotion at all. These were people who had stared at death before and found it less frightening than the cages they had escaped. Remember, Reaper called out, his voice carrying across the position. They think numbers matter. Show them what human creativity looks like. The first wave hit the outer perimeter and immediately began dying. The humans had spent 6 hours turning the approach into a killing field. Pressure-sensitive explosives detonated in chains, sending shrapnel through packed scourge formations. Chemical accelerants ignited into walls of flame that caught and spread through the creature's natural secretions. Pit traps lined with sharpened stakes channeled the swarm into narrow corridors, where concentrated fire cut them down by hundreds. But the scourge kept coming. They climbed over their own dead, adapting to each trap, pushing forward through losses that would have broken any other force. Within minutes, they breached the outer defenses and crashed into the human lines. Close-quarters combat erupted across the sector. This was where the humans truly excelled. Diego Santos moved through the swarm like a dancer, his blade finding weak points in carapaces with surgical precision. Every strike killed. Every movement positioned him for the next kill. He was covered in black ichor within seconds, laughing as he fought. Marcus Chen had positioned himself at a choke point with a modified flamethrower. He burned through fuel cartridges at an unsustainable rate, creating a wall of fire that nothing could cross. When the weapon finally ran dry, he pulled out a combat shotgun and continued firing point blank into the press of bodies. When that ran empty, he used the weapon as a club. Ghost and her tunnel team had disappeared underground hours ago. Now they emerged behind scourge lines, collapsing tunnels and detonating charges that caused sections of the battlefield to crater inward, swallowing hundreds of warriors. She moved through the chaos like a phantom, appearing to slit a warrior's vulnerable nerve cluster, then vanishing before retaliation could reach her. The battle raged for 3 hours. The humans gave ground meter by meter, falling back to secondary positions, then tertiary defenses. They were outnumbered nearly 20-1, and the math was relentless. Bodies fell on both sides, human and scourge mixing in the carnage. Major Chen coordinated from the command post, her voice steady as she directed ammunition drops and medical evacuations. She watched her people fight and die, and part of her wondered if she had sent them to their doom. These were criminals, yes, but they were also human beings. They deserved better than this meat grinder. Then something changed on the battlefield. The Scourge assault began to falter. Warriors stumbled, their movements uncoordinated. Some attacked their own kind. Chemical signals that normally unified the swarm into a single organism had been corrupted by Ghost's earlier poisoning. Now, under extreme stress, the hive mind was fracturing. Reaper saw the opening instantly. "Push!" he roared. "Now!" The humans counterattacked with renewed fury. They had been defending, conserving strength, waiting for exactly this moment. Now they surged forward into the confused Scourge formations, weapons blazing, voices raised in primal war cries that echoed across the battlefield. Isabella Cortez led a flanking team that hit the Scourge command cluster, a group of larger, more intelligent warrior forms that coordinated attacks. She threw everything she had at them: grenades, plasma charges, finally her own body in a tackle that brought down a commander form twice her size. They went down together in a tangle of limbs and blades. Only one got back up. Isabella stood bleeding from a dozen wounds and kept fighting. The tide turned. The Scourge, leaderless and confused, began retreating. It was the first time Coalition observers had ever seen the species withdraw from a battle they were winning numerically. The humans pursued them to the tunnel entrances, killing stragglers, collapsing passages, ensuring no easy return. When silence finally fell, the battlefield looked like a vision of hell. 20,000 Scourge corpses lay scattered across the scorched earth. Human casualties were devastating, 800 dead, another 1,000 wounded. But they had held. Against impossible odds, they had held and won. Reaper walked through the aftermath, checking on survivors, marking the dead for retrieval. He found Diego Santos sitting on a pile of Scourge bodies, covered head to toe in black blood, still grinning. "Best fight I've had in years," Diego said weakly. "You're bleeding," Reaper observed. "Don't care." "Worth it." Diego's grin faded. "We actually won. We beat them." "We survived," Reaper corrected. "That's what we do." The galaxy takes notice. News of the victory spread through Coalition channels within hours. Xerxen 9, the planet they had been losing for 6 months, was now firmly in Coalition control. The Scourge had abandoned 3 entire sectors, retreating deeper into unconquered space. It was the first major strategic victory in 3 years of war. But the cost of that victory became clear as reports filtered back to Coalition command. Human combat footage showed tactics that violated dozens of interstellar warfare conventions: the use of biological weapons, the deliberate targeting of breeding chambers, the complete absence of mercy toward wounded enemies. It was all technically against the rules. Ambassador Theron stood before the Coalition Council once again, this time defending the human methods. "They achieved what we could not. Xerxen 9 is saved. Millions of lives preserved. How can we condemn the methods that brought this result?" A Peltorian delegate rose, her voice sharp. "Because there must be limits, even in war. If we abandon our principles to defeat the Scourge, then the Scourge has already won. They have made us into them." "The humans didn't abandon principles they never claimed to have," Theron argued. "They are weapons we chose to deploy. You cannot give a weapon moral instructions and then act surprised when it cuts." The debate raged, but the reality was undeniable. Coalition High Command began requesting human deployments to other contested worlds. Within weeks, human units were scattered across a dozen systems, each one bringing their brutal effectiveness to failing fronts. Everywhere they went, the Scourge retreated. The tide of the war was finally turning, the changing of monsters. 6 months after the initial deployment, Major Chen stood in the medical bay of Kepler Station, reviewing casualty reports. Of the original 3,000 humans deployed, only 1,200 remained combat effective. The rest were dead, severely wounded, or missing. But those 1,200 had become something beyond what they were. She found Reaper in the observation deck, staring at a planet they had just liberated. He looked different now, leaner, harder, with eyes that seemed to see through things rather than at them. Constant combat had refined him into something purely functional, a killing machine with just enough humanity left to follow orders. "How do you feel?" Chen asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Empty," Reaper said simply. "I thought this would fill something inside me. Purpose, meaning, redemption maybe, but it's just more killing. I'm good at it. Better than I've ever been. But it doesn't mean anything. You're saving the galaxy. He laughed without humor. Am I? Or am I just feeding a different kind of hunger? He turned to face her. Major, do you know what the difference is between me and the Scourge? You're human. No. The difference is I know what I'm doing is wrong. The Scourge acts on instinct. I act on choice. Every kill, every brutal tactic, every war crime I commit, I'm aware of it. I choose it anyway. That makes me worse, not better. Chen had no response. She had watched her people evolve through combat, and not all changes were positive. Some had stopped speaking entirely, communicating only through violence. Others had developed rituals around killing, collecting trophies, marking their bodies with symbols that represented death counts. They were becoming what the galaxy feared most, monsters who enjoyed being monstrous. Ghost was perhaps the most changed. She had always been cold, but now she seemed to exist in some space beyond normal human emotion. Chen found her in the armory, meticulously cleaning weapons that were already spotless. We need to talk about your last mission, Chen said carefully. Ghost didn't look up. The hive clearing on Mordak 7? Mission successful. 3,000 Scourge eliminated, including 2 breeding queens. You were supposed to evacuate civilians first. There were Mordaxian refugees sheltering near the hive. They were already dead, Ghost said flatly. The Scourge had infected them with spore carriers. In 3 days, they would have become conversion vectors. I killed them before that happened. Mercy, really. You killed 73 sentient beings without authorization. Ghost finally looked up, and her eyes were completely empty. I did what was necessary. That's what you brought us here to do. Don't act surprised when we do it. These conversations were happening more frequently. The humans were effective, yes, but they were slipping further from anything resembling controlled military assets. They made their own decisions, followed their own codes, and answered to no authority except their own sense of survival. The final campaign coalition intelligence located the Scourge Nexus, the Queen world where the entire invasion had originated. It was a planet completely converted to biological architecture, pulsing with hive mind activity, defended by millions of warrior forms. Taking it would end the war. Failing would mean the death of every attacking force. Coalition High Command planned an assault involving their entire remaining fleet. Projected casualties were astronomical, 70% losses minimum. They would need to punch through 3 defensive spheres, land troops on hostile terrain, and fight their way to the planetary core where the Queen resided. It was borderline suicidal. When the human contingent received their briefing, Reaper listened quietly. 1,200 humans remained combat-ready. They would be assigned to the Vanguard, the first troops on the ground, tasked with clearing landing zones and holding them while coalition forces deployed. This is a death sentence, Major Chen said privately to Reaper afterward. They're using you as expendable shock troops. That's what we are, Reaper replied. That's what we've always been. At least this time it's for something that matters. Does it matter to you? He considered the question. I don't know anymore. But it's the last mission. One way or another, it ends here. That has value. The human contingent prepared for the assault with grim efficiency. They knew the odds. They knew most of them wouldn't survive. Some wrote letters they knew would never be delivered. Others simply sharpened their blades and checked their ammunition. A few, like Diego Santos, seemed almost relieved. Better to die fighting than rot in a cage, he said. At least this death means something. Ghost gathered her tunnel team, now down to just 7 members from the original 20. We go deep, she told them. Deeper than anyone else. We find the Queen and we kill her. Nothing else matters. We won't make it back, one of her team observed. Good, Ghost said. I don't want to see what I've become in peacetime. The assault on Nightmare, the attack on the Nexus world, was the largest military operation in Coalition history. 500 ships entered the system, immediately engaging the Scourge orbital defenses. Space filled with fire and dying vessels as both sides committed everything to the battle. The first human dropships hit atmosphere under heavy fire. 24 transports became fireballs before reaching the surface. The rest crashed through, deploying their cargo into the heart of hell itself. Reaper's boots hit ground in a landscape that defied sanity. The entire planet was alive, breathing, pulsing, aware. Buildings weren't constructed but grown from flesh and chitin. The air itself was thick with spores and chemical signals. Warrior forms erupted from the ground by thousands, and the humans met them with gunfire and fury. This was not a battle that could be described in tactical terms. It was simply survival measured in seconds. The humans carved a landing zone through sheer violence, every meter purchased with blood. Coalition forces landed behind them and immediately began fortifying positions, awed and horrified by what the humans had accomplished. Ghost and her team disappeared into the planet's infrastructure within minutes. They navigated passages that were less tunnels and more arteries in some massive organism. They killed everything they encountered, moving deeper, always deeper, following chemical gradients toward the planetary core. The battle raged for 16 hours. Human casualties mounted horrifically, 50% dead in the first hour, 70% by hour 8. But they held the landing zones. They carved paths inland. They did the impossible. Reaper found himself fighting beside a Xanthari warrior at one point, both of them back-to-back against a swarm of enemy combatants. "You fight well for a primitive," the alien gasped. "You don't fight bad for someone with honor," Reaper replied, putting 3 rounds through a warrior form's head. They survived that engagement through teamwork, and Reaper felt something unexpected: respect for these aliens who had initially dismissed humans as savage. Deep below the surface, Ghost's team reached the Queen Chamber. The massive creature filled a cavern the size of a city. Her body bloated with egg sacs, her mind coordinating the defense of the entire planet. She was beautiful in a terrible way, the apex of biological evolution dedicated solely to consumption and reproduction. Ghost's team had one gravitational bomb, a weapon that would collapse the chamber and kill everything inside, including them. They set it without hesitation, then formed a defensive perimeter to buy the timer its necessary minutes. The Queen's guards came in waves. The team fired until their ammunition ran dry, then fought with blades and bare hands. One by one they fell. Ghost was the last standing when the timer hit 0, and her final thought was simple satisfaction that she had completed the mission. The explosion collapsed the planetary core. The Queen died. With her death, the hive mind coordinating the scourge across the galaxy simply stopped. Warrior forms everywhere froze, then began attacking each other or simply dying as their connection to the central intelligence severed. The war ended not with a bang, but with confused silence as billions of scourge organisms lost their purpose and expired. Aftermath. Heroes and monsters. Of the 1,200 humans who assaulted the Nexus world, 800 survived. They were evacuated to Kepler Station for medical treatment and debriefing. The galaxy celebrated victory while trying to reconcile what it had taken to achieve it. Ambassador Theron visited the human medical wards personally. He found Reaper in recovery, his body covered in bandages but his eyes still sharp. "You saved us," Theron said simply. "Every living being in this galaxy owes you a debt." "We don't want gratitude," Reaper replied. "We want to know what happens now. You promised us reduced sentences, possible freedom. Was that real or just motivation?" Theron had dreaded this conversation. The Coalition Council is divided. Some want to honor the agreement. Others fear what it means to release people like you back into society. "You're heroes, but you're also monsters," Reaper finished. "You can say it. We know what we are. We've always known." The debates consumed coalition government for weeks. Humanity's criminals had won the war through methods that violated every principle of civilized warfare. They deserved recognition but also inspired fear. How do you reward people who saved everything by being willing to do anything? Major Chen met with the surviving humans to deliver the final decision. 800 faces looked back at her, scarred and changed by their service. "The Coalition has agreed to honor its commitments," she announced. "All surviving human combatants will have their sentences reduced to time served. You're free." There was no celebration, just silence. "There's a condition," Chen continued. "You cannot remain in Coalition space. You'll be transported back to Earth, given new identities and monitored for the rest of your lives. The galaxy is grateful but also terrified of you. They want you to disappear." Diego Santos laughed bitterly. "So we're heroes as long as we're invisible." "Sounds about right." "What about the dead?" someone asked. "The ones who didn't make it back." "Do they get anything?" "Monuments," Chen said quietly. "Memorials on every world you liberated. Your names will be remembered even if you can't see them." Reaper stood slowly. "We don't need monuments. We need you to remember what you learned here. Next time you face something impossible, remember that monsters aren't always your enemy. Sometimes they're the only thing standing between you and extinction. Return to darkness. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. The surviving humans sat in transport ships processing what they had become. They had been given purpose, used as weapons, and then discarded once their usefulness ended. It was familiar territory for most of them. Chen sat with Reaper during the final approach to Earth. "What will you do now?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've been a criminal and a soldier. I don't know how to be anything else. Maybe I'll find something. Maybe I'll just exist until I stop." "You saved the galaxy." "I killed for the galaxy. There's a difference." He looked out the viewport at the blue planet growing larger. "Major, do you know what the worst part is? I miss it. The fighting, the purpose, the clarity of survival. Peace is going to be harder than war ever was." The ships landed at a secure facility in Antarctica, not far from the original Tartarus prison. The 800 survivors were processed, given new identities, and released into a world that would never know what they had done. Some would integrate successfully. Others would struggle with civilian life. A few would eventually return to criminal behavior, unable to exist without violence. But they had changed the galaxy. The scourge was extinct, wiped out by creatures they had underestimated. The coalition rebuilt stronger and wiser, having learned that survival sometimes required uncomfortable alliances. The last entry, Ambassador Theron, made a final log entry in his personal journal. Classified at the highest level. "The war is over. We survived because humanity sent us their worst. Criminals, killers, broken people with nothing to lose. They fought without honor, without mercy, without restraint. They did things that will haunt my dreams forever. And they saved us all. The great question remains unanswered. Were they heroes or monsters? I believe they were both and neither. They were tools we chose to use, knowing the cost. The blood on their hands is also on ours. We asked Earth for soldiers. They sent us killers. We wanted warriors. They sent us survivors. We expected honor. They gave us victory. May we never need them again. May we never forget what they sacrificed. And may we never be comfortable with the fact that our salvation required becoming the very thing we feared. The galaxy is safe. The price was our innocence." Reaper sat in a small apartment in a city he didn't know, under a name that wasn't his, watching rain streak down the window. Somewhere out there, 799 other humans were doing the same, trying to be normal, trying to forget, trying to live with what they had become. He had saved the galaxy. He was a hero. He was a monster. He was human. And somehow that was the most complicated thing of all.